New polling shows Democratic leadership with only a 27% approval. It's a record low for the party in CNN polling back to 2008. What do they need to do? What is their challenge?
Well, the challenge is that they've got on the Senate side incredibly ineffective and, frankly, out of touch leadership that has no idea how to offer an alternative to Donald Trump. They don't want to bash it, slap around the president. What they want is that agenda delivered in a more efficient, more effective, more compassionate way. And so I'm looking for that. And with the exception of Cory Booker, who delivered a 25-hour explanation of how they can do better, I've not really seen that. You've got AOC, who's very public out there, but very extreme, very partisan, very polarizing. That's not what they're looking for either. And the problem with the Democrats is you got 1/3 on that side, on the AOC side, 1/3 on the more centrist side, and 1/3 that simply doesn't care about the ideology and just wants things to work. If I were a Democrat right now, I would not be looking to the Senate or the House. I'd be looking to the governors, the people who actually have to administer policies day by day. Let the governors stand up, come forward with why they've been successful in their states.
Boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. So we got to talk about the Democrat Party, a party that is currently in a state of free fall. And for as much as the mainstream liberal media wants to talk about the approval rating of President Trump based off their rigged polls, because we know that the polls are fake, right? These are the same pollsters that told us that Kamala Harris was going to beat Trump. We know that they like to underestimate President Trump. They like to overestimate the Democrats. So even in the rigged polls, President Trump is still doing way better than the Democrats.
All right, well, let's just assume on Tuesday we went to a Democratic house of a friend of ours. And let's look at these numbers right here. And there was a bunch of Democrats there. Well, guess what? If you're a Democrat, you're frustrated, you're disappointed, and you are angry.
And unlike the Democrats, President Trump's supporters actually like him, right? I mean, we can't say that about the supporters of the Democrat Party, right? The supporters of the Democrat Party don't feel good about the Democrats. President Trump supporters feel good about President Trump, which is something that MSNBC found out the hard way.
Are you prepared to pay higher prices for goods?
I've been paying higher prices, sweetie, in the last, when Biden got in office, my groceries have doubled, my gas has doubled. No, I'm already used to it. I'm not used to it.
But you're prepared for more. We're looking at, with the tariffs, these are massive tariffs.
No, but it has to happen before it goes back down.
They are sticking with him for multiple reasons. One, they say this is what he promised on the campaign trail. It came as no surprise to them, even with the impacts that we're talking about. And two, they say that this is something that they believe in. It's a mission they ultimately believe in and a goal of bringing back manufacturing to the United States. Listen to how his supporters explained it to me.
Nobody likes to pay more for anything. I don't. But in the long run, I think it's going to be good.
The tariffs, they don't scare me at all. My money went down just like everybody else's. My investments in there coming right back up. It doesn't faze me a bit.
I know that as a country, we owe a lot. We're in a lot of debt. And if those tariffs are going to help bring back more to our economy, I'm all for it.
Anna, in some cases, you heard some of his supporters essentially repeating the analogy that he uses sometimes when he talks about a sick patient, in that you might have some tough moments in the beginning, but this is ultimately going to lead to a country that is stronger and healthier. It's clear that his base is sticking with him, even as when you look at polling among the general population, this is an issue that shows to be pretty risky for his presidency.
Yeah, so you see that, you heard that. Okay, that is the liberal media desperately trying to create a reality just to find out that their propaganda, their brainwashing is not working on Trump supporters, right? People who actually critically think, right? People who understand that, hey, things are a work in progress. Let's wait and see rather than to panic, right? Which is what the Democrats and the mainstream liberal media are currently doing. Because Democrats, let's be real, they have 4 years to deliver us a great economy, and they didn't, right? They delivered us inflation, okay? And because of that, Democrats don't have any real solutions. The only thing that they know how to do is to boohoo, whine, and cry about Trump, right? They're trying to make the midterms about impeaching Trump, and they're just getting more and more and more deranged when it comes to their fight against Trump. Like, for example, Illinois Governor Pritzker is actually facing some backlash for calling for mass protests, right? In which it sounds as if, who knows, he could be calling for violence, because Democrats told us that when politicians say stuff like this, when they call for mass protests, this is potentially calling for violence. Take a look.
The dangers that my family experienced in Ukraine, the dangers that we saw in Nazi Germany, especially in the earliest days of Nazi Germany, are the dangers that we need to react to now. If we don't, things will get much, much worse. And so we've got to raise alarm bells to everybody. It's a 5-alarm fire, everyone. It's time to step out of your comfort zone and step out into the streets and speak up and make your voices heard, because that's the only thing that we have. That's the power that we have. And we can stop them in their tracks, because you know what? Republicans in Congress don't want to lose re-election.
Never before in my life have I called for mass protests, for mobilization, for disruption, but I am now.
A more aggressive J.B. Pritzker has emerged on the political stump in recent days. The governor attacking both Republicans and his fellow Democrats at a fiery speech in New Hampshire Sunday. As political reporter Chris Ty reports, both what he's saying and where he's saying it signals a growing likelihood that he's running for president in 2028.
Governor Pritzker ratcheting up his visibility and his volume in recent days. He has spent years railing against the Trump White House. Now he's taking on what he calls timid Democrats in an effort, some say, to distance himself from would-be rivals in 2028. All as the White House pushed back hard late today.
So I have one question for all of you, Granite Staters. Are you ready for the fight?
Sounding more like a presidential contender than ever before, Governor Pritzker this weekend talking to Democrats in critically important New Hampshire, home of the first in the nation presidential primary, which is still years away. Primaries are where members of the same party try to defeat each other. Pritzker using the moment to take on would-be Democratic rivals.
Those same do-nothing Democrats want to blame our losses on our defense of black people, of trans kids, of immigrants, instead of their own lack of guts and gumption.
Calling some members of his party too timid, he called on Democrats to take a stand in ways he hasn't before.
Never before in my life have I called for mass protests, for mobilization, for disruption, but I am now. Republicans cannot know a moment of peace. They have to understand that we will fight their cruelty with every megaphone and microphone that we have. We must castigate them on the soapbox and then punish them at the ballot box.
Stephen, Illinois Governor Pritzker just called for mass protests and disruption, saying Republicans cannot know peace. While Trump's border crossings are down 95% and ICE is locking up 800 criminals, is Pritzker inciting insurrection, and will DOJ take action?
Well, what I would say is that his comments, if nothing else, clearly can be construed as inciting violence. So President Trump survived 2 assassination attempts against his life. Of course, there's been many more credible threats against President Trump and his family and associates. We've, of course, seen the spate of left-wing domestic terrorism all across this country. By the way, the destruction of property sits directly adjacent to attacks on humans and physical attacks. In other words, once you tolerate and once you allow for attacks on property, you're just a step away from people throwing Molotov cocktails into people's homes. And you've even seen some, I think one example of a formerly prominent Washington Post journalist who seem to be celebrating the murder of a healthcare CEO, right? Health insurance CEO. And that's the point we've reached in this country, where people are engaging in rhetoric and behavior that puts the lives of public servants in danger, puts the lives of conservative Americans in danger. And so that's the first thing I would say. And then, of course, secondly, right, just this war that Democrat governors and mayors are waging against federal law enforcement. I mean, this is nullificationist behavior. This is successionist behavior, where they're saying they don't recognize the supremacy of federal law enforcement in terms of protecting the lives and livelihoods of American citizens against a foreign invasion. We've never seen anything like it. And, of course, the result of their conduct is that they're allowing illegal aliens to go free and rape and murder their own citizens. So I can't imagine having a leader in a city or a state that would privilege the well-being of illegal alien murderers over their own citizens, but that's where we are right now.
So I think it's terrible hypocrisy on the part of Stephen Miller and of others who have said somehow that my remarks, which are about peaceful protest, which is the only valid kind of protest that we have here in this country, that I have called on people to express themselves, is something that obviously not understood by the gang that controls the White House today.
Pritzker will be headlining a similar dinner to the one he had in New Hampshire up in Michigan next month. And to capitalize on the attention generated on the East Coast this weekend, he's making the rounds on cable news tonight. At UIC, Chris Ty, CBS News, Chicago.
Yeah, so you see that, you heard that. Okay, Governor Pritzker is basically saying, no, I meant peaceful protest, even though he said he's calling for mass protests and that Republicans cannot know peace, right? He explicitly said that Republicans should not have peace while calling for mass protests. And I haven't even mentioned the fact that this guy, of course, tried to compare Trump to Hitler, right, or MSNBC. He talked about this being like Nazi Germany, in which, again, these leftists, these Democrats don't realize that this is the type of rhetoric that inspires people to commit acts of violence, but they really don't care. Okay, again, the Democrat rhetoric is getting so out of control that even CNN reporters are going off script and warning Democrats about how calling Trump Hitler has unintended, or who knows, maybe intended consequences that probably is not going to be good for this country. We've basically already seen the results of the Democrat rhetoric with the assassination attempts on President Trump's life. Take a look.
George W. Bush was regularly compared to Hitler. Same for Reagan. And don't get me wrong, Biden, Obama, Clinton, they all got the Hitler treatment at different times, although the right tends to prefer calling Democrats communists or socialists. Indeed, the Hitler comparison goes all the way back to, well, Hitler. It makes you wonder who people utilized to represent evil before World War II. You can just imagine Larry David 100 years ago comparing President Coolidge to the Kaiser. The sort of attack has become so common it has a name. Argumentum ad Hitlerum. It's a type of ad hominem attack. Rather than discussing issues, you try to discredit your opponent by associating them with someone who's reviled. Indeed, fascist analogies have become so ubiquitous that attorney and author Mike Godwin came up with his famous law. If an online discussion goes on long enough, eventually someone will bring up a comparison to Hitler or the Nazis. Alas, even Godwin fell prey to that kind of thinking in the last election when he said it might be okay to compare Trump to Hitler. Sure, if you don't like a politician, you can always find some way they or their rhetoric is reminiscent of fascism, but you should show some sense of proportion. Perhaps we need a new law, something like people always think the last politician they don't like is worse than any that came before, when in truth, anyone with the slightest understanding of history knows the comparison is dumb. And it's ugly. And it's potentially dangerous. Gerald Posner wrote Case Closed, what many of us consider to be the definitive book on the assassination of the John F. Kennedy assassination. Writing for the Wall Street Journal just last year, he noted this: "It's a shame that those who repeatedly talked about Mr. Trump as an existential threat hadn't studied how the volatile atmosphere in 1963 in Dallas and 1968 in Memphis, Tennessee, emboldened Lee Harvey Oswald and James Earl Ray to assassinate John F. Kennedy and Martin Luther King Jr. There's a price to reckless speech that portrays public figures as threats to the American way of life. It can be the spark that helps to push an assassin to act. It is impossible to separate the violence of political assassinations in modern American history from the temperature of the times.
He wants the benefit of the doubt, but if if Trump had said what he said, do you think that Democrats would give him the benefit of the doubt? Of course not.
The GOP is strong. I mean, I think President Trump has had one of the strongest 100 days in history of any president. He's accomplished a lot. And it's building blocks to build on for the future of Republicans. And as long as Governor Pritzker is out there running for president like he's done for years, I think it's a good sign for Republicans that we have an opportunity to seize pick up more seats. We have an opportunity in the midterms to deliver on results. And I do want to point out something about Governor Pritzker announcing he's running. I mean, he camped out in 2022 in New Hampshire, right? He jockeyed to replace Biden on the ticket.
Yeah, he didn't actually announce. He's on the circuit.
He's on the circuit. He's thinking about it and clearly wants to see his name in the headlines. But what is alarming is when he said, I wrote it down, Republicans cannot know a moment of peace. Here's a sitting governor and a potential presidential candidate calling for violence against Republicans. If they head down that line, it's going to look very, very good for our country and for the GOP in the future.
That is ridiculous.
Okay, if President Trump had said that,
he's calling for mass protest, he's calling for activism, he's calling for Democrats not to
and people will interpret it in these two ways.
Absolutely.
I think what you're saying is certainly valid, and you were going to highlight the fact that even using the word peace implies might there be violence. Pritzker will have to answer for that.
Yeah, so of course, once again, Democrats are showing the world that rules for thee, not for me, right? We're allowed to just say whatever, do whatever, and you can't criticize us for it, but we will criticize you for doing the same thing that we do, right? I mean, because ultimately today, regardless of whether or not J.B. Pritzker was actually calling for violence, if a Republican said what he said, Democrats would definitely be saying you're calling for violence. So with that being said, expect a lot of this from Democrats because they're trying to ratchet up their Trump derangement, okay? There are a lot of Democrats now that I think are going to come out and they're going to think about running for president, right? And they're going to run on Trump derangement. They're not going to run on any type of solutions or anything they can do for the American people because they fail the American people. The only thing they can run on is Trump derangement, but even the liberal media propagandists are admitting that if the Democrats run with the same strategy that they ran with in the past when it comes to just being Trump deranged, that's probably not going to work out well for them.
You know, if Coca-Cola had a bunch of people no longer drinking Coca-Cola, you'd want to actually go interview people who used to drink Coca-Cola and ask them, how come you're not drinking Coca-Cola anymore? I don't get the sense of that at all. There's still this idea, oh, no, if we just sell it better, if we just do it better. And then on the last comment, it's just kind of interesting. I do think what happened to the Democratic Party is they kept comparing Biden to Trump rather than Biden to what a president should be able to do. And I think everyone was like, well, Trump's kind of out there and it's good enough to go against Trump. Well, no, like that shouldn't have been but I do think whatever that explanation is, I think it all had to do with them judging Biden through the prism of, well, Trump's sort of out there, so it's good enough for that.
Ashley Allison, what do you think?
Look, in 2022, after the midterms, I said if you want to run for president and be the Democratic nominee, anybody who wants to run should be able to run. Unfortunately, nobody, well, a couple people, but
Dean Phillips.
Right, Dean Phillips stepped up. Democrats, we should have had a primary for this midterm election. And we didn't. And so now we're living with the consequences of it. I hope that our party wakes up and realizes it. And that me saying that doesn't mean that I don't respect Joe Biden. But there's a reality in that we should have given our voters an opportunity to make a decision for themselves. And by the time we had to make a decision, it was too late.
By the way, it's just 3 straight nominations where Democratic voters didn't get a chance to pick the nominee. The elites picked Hillary Clinton, the elites picked Joe Biden, and the elites picked Kamala Harris. There was no actual set of voters who felt like they had a say in this.
Yeah, so you see that, you heard that. A rare moment of truth from the mainstream liberal media. Chuck Todd admitting that there is no democracy within the Democrat Party, right? This is why I chuckle at these Democrats that believe that they're back, right? That somehow their party is not still super unpopular because it is. It's like, no, you have a lot of problems to solve, right? Your party is not a party in good standing right now. At the very least with the Republican Party, the Republican base actually is satisfied with the president, right? But with the Democrat Party base, the base is not satisfied with the Democrats, mainly because the Democrats are extremely Trump deranged to the point where they radicalize their base. But nobody likes the Democrats at all, okay? Not even their own base, okay? So, yes, this is what you're going to see. You're going to see more and more and more of these Democrats run on Trump derangement. They're going to get more radical. They're going to start saying things like what J.B. Pritzker is saying that could be interpreted as inciting violence. But regardless, I mean, at this point, that's kind of what they want. They want as much chaos as possible, right? And this is what they're trying to manifest in certain sectors of our society, right? In the economic sector, they're trying to manifest chaos, right? When you talk about Tesla terrorism, chaos, right? That's what these people are all about, right? Open borders, chaos. This is what they want. And this is why they can't campaign on anything except Trump derangement. When are Democrats going to present their economic plan, right? What is the Democrat plan? What is their plan? What is their plan to close the border? What is their plan to end the war between Ukraine and Russia? They don't have a plan. They don't have a plan to do anything at all. That's what I want people to understand at this point. The Democrats are a 100% an opposition party. They have zero solutions, and they are not interested in trying to make your life better at all. They're not. They're just interested in trying to undermine Trump. That's the only thing they're interested in. And that's the only thing they're talking about. Again, I just wish somebody would ask one of these Democrats, what is your plan? What would you do, right? What would you do? Well, we saw for the last 4 years what they do. So, again, don't be fooled, okay? A lot of these Democrats are going to come out of woodwork. All of them now, again, they smell blood in the water. They're all going to be coming out trying to run for president, every single last one of them. And that's why I think that this Democrat primary coming up is going to be so fascinating, right? It is going to be the best show on television. And it's really just getting started, to be honest with you. So, again, we will see. Let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.